In the last several weeks, 60 days saw rain and 79 days saw high winds. In that same time period, 108 days saw either rain or high winds. How many days saw both rain and high winds? There's a lot going on in this set problem. And when there's a lot going on, I like to visualize it. I'm a visual girl, and so I'm going to draw a Venn diagram to see if I can't put some visualization to this problem. I have two sets that I'm worried about. I have one set that represents the days that saw rain. And so I'm going to color that in as a blue set in my Venn diagram and label it the R set for rain. And I'm going to write down that the number of elements in that set is 60 because the number of days that saw rain is 60. I have another set, and that's the days that saw high winds. So I'm going to make that my red set. And this one saw high winds, so I'm going to call that my W set. And I know that the number of days that saw high winds was 79. So there were 79 days in the red set. I do know one more thing. 108 days saw either rain or high winds. And when I'm talking set theory and the word or stands for union. That means that the number of elements that fell in the union of R and W is equal to 108. And what is it that we're looking for? Well, that's the question at the very end. How many days saw both rain and high winds? And when I use the word and combined with sets, I should be thinking intersection. We are looking for the number of elements in the intersection of these two sets. Well, where do I begin? Usually we're given an intersection and then we can work the other way, but what do I do if I have a union, and the union meaning the set, all of the elements that are in the blue together with all the elements in the red, right? So I have a union, I have some in one and some in the other. How do I get that intersection? Oh, I'm thinking, let's see if this rings a bell. In our textbook, they talked about one of the cardinality properties. And the cardinality properties helps tie all of these four things together. The number of elements in one set, the number of elements in the other set, the number of elements in the union, and the number of elements in the intersection. And how did we tie them together? Well, let me write down this law of cardinality. So there's a lot of cardinality properties, but I think I know which one I need. The cardinality properties, one of them tells us the following, and see if this doesn't make sense, that the number of elements that are in the intersection is equal to the number of elements in the first set plus the number of elements in the second set minus the number of elements in the union. Or more specifically, right, you have so many elements in our rain set, so many in the wind set, but when you add them up, you double count your intersection, right? So how can we get that intersection? Well, we just subtract off the union, and that's going to tell us how many were left over or double counted. Maybe I confused you more, but let's go ahead and let's work through on this property. I'm trying to figure out the number of elements in my intersection. Well, that's equal to the number of elements in the first set, R, which is 60, plus the number of elements in my second set, the wind set, which is 79, minus the number of elements in my union, which is 108. And let's check. What does this tell us? This tells us that the number of elements in the intersection is 60 plus 79, which is 139, minus 108, and that means the number of elements in the intersection is simply 139 minus 108, which is just 31. That tells me that the number of days that saw both rain and high winds was 31 days. Now, if I want to check and make sure it all ties together, I'm going to go back to my Venn diagram and I'll label the intersection piece 31. The number of days that saw rain was 60. So if the blue set contains 60, 31 of which are in the intersection, that meant the number of days that only saw rain was 29, because 29 and 31 gives me 60. Similarly, the number of days that only saw wind, well, that has to come from taking 79 and subtract off 31. And so that tells me the number of days that only saw wind was 48. And let's check, let's make sure. If I have 29 days that only saw rain, plus 31 days that saw both rain and high winds, and add that to 48, which only saw winds, we should get our union. Let's check. 29 plus 31 plus 48. If we add them all up, we should get 108 if we've done this properly. 108. Beautiful. So, yep, we did this correctly. There are 31 days in the intersection, so there are 31 days that saw both rain and high winds.